We are not alone. You are watching Contact TV with your hosts, Lesley Mitchell-Clark
and Wes Roberts,
exploring ufology, metaphysics, and beyond with the world's foremost experts. And hello, everyone, and welcome to our 10th season of Contact TV. Yes, it has been a decade. Hard to believe, but it is true. And we are happy to be here. And I am joined, this is Lesley Mitchell-Clark. I'm joined as always by my co-host and the producer of the show, Wes Roberts. Wes, how are you doing this evening or morning or afternoon, whenever one is experiencing this in solitude?
Well, to be quite honest, until very recently, I didn't know what day of the week it was, but I'm re-entering the workforce in some ways, so I'm doing well this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, I've just had the marvelous news that my cleaning ladies are coming back online, and my cleaning lady has OCD, so I'm really happy. I'm not going to fix her. I'm not going to do any therapy on her at all.
One piece at a time.
I like the OCD. Okay. Anyway, we are so happy to be welcoming back to the program one of our very favorite guests, Dr. Barry Taff, and we're going to get into talking to him in just a bit. But Wes, why don't you give us a little bit about Barry for our listeners?
I will do so. So you may not be able to see this well. I'll just hold it up for a sec. But it's Dr. Taff's book called Aliens Above, Ghosts Below. And I actually need to ask him at some point, hopefully in this interview, about this title. I have my ideas about it. Anyway, I'm going to read directly from the back. Dr. Taff, who holds a doctorate in psychophysiology, I hope I said that right, with a minor in biomedical engineering, worked as a research associate at UCLA's former parapsychology laboratory from 1969 through 1978. During his 36-year career, which we know from reading the book is now a 40-plus year career, Dr. Taff has investigated more than 4,000 cases of ghosts, hauntings, poltergeists, and he has conducted extensive studies in telepathy and precognition, which led to the development of the original protocols and methodologies for what was later coined remote viewing, a favorite thing of mine. He also was himself investigated as a psychic subject in 1969, the results of which, entitled A Laboratory Investigation of Telepathy, the Study of a Psychic, were published in Behavioral Neuropsychiatry, Volume 6, numbers 1 to 12, April-December 1974 to March 1975. And Lesley will fill in the rest of that intro.
Well, boy, I think that should be a musical, Behavioral Neuropsychiatry, the musical. That's coming up. But many of you will be familiar with Dr. Barry Taff as the principal advisor, consultant on the very, very disturbing and quite boundary pushing film of its time called The Entity, starring the wonderful actress Barbara Hershey. And of course that was based on a real life investigation that was carried out by Dr. Taff and his associates. So with all that being said, it is my pleasure to welcome back to the program Dr. Barry Taff. Dr. Taff, how are you?
Oh, fine. Thank you for having me back, Lesley. It's been a long time.
It has, but well worth the wait. And I understand now you have even, are you still in the Southwest or have you gone back to?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
No, I'm still in the Southwest.
Okay. Well, we are very glad you could take the time out to join us. And before we began tonight's show, Wes and I were chatting, and we both thought that a good way to kick things off would be simply to ask you, in this intervening time where we haven't had a chance to chat, what things, what events, discoveries of all sorts stand out to you in this time period, the past 5 years or so, because so much is going on and a lot of things have to do with quantum physics and things that you talked about years ago. So tell me what's really speaking out to you, Dr. Taff.
Well, at this point, after being in the field for half a century, some patterns have emerged, some facts through those patterns, which are quite extraordinary. And we know enough now where the working model for certain things like poltergeist activity is somewhat beginning to unravel itself, to be explained. And it's a lot more complicated than we ever imagined, and yet at other levels it's much simpler. You know, the word poltergeist means noisy ghost, noisy spirit. And the belief of our ancestors was that that's indeed what it was. Well, that was a great idea, but it didn't turn out to be provable. You couldn't test it. The evidence suggests that the phenomena manifested in such cases is what we call recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis. But then again, that was as far as it went. And in science, there's two ways to do research. One is you conduct controlled studies in a laboratory setting and hope to prove out your hypothesis. Well, a lot of things that occur in parapsychology cannot be brought into a lab because it's the way the phenomenon works. You're dependent on hoping to experience it a sufficient number of times where patterns emerge. And if you look for longitudinal patterns, that those patterns give us a clue as to what's going on. And after 50 years, the patterns are so discernible. They're so blatant. They're like hitting us over the head. And they're somewhat simple. Let me put up a metaphor. You got a DVD in your hand. You want to watch it. So what do you need? Well, you need a DVD player. You need a TV. They've got to be connected. They both have to be plugged in the wall. You then have to put the DVD in the player, and then you got to use the remote to operate it. If any part of that ensemble's missing, you get nothing shows up on the television. And the reason this model is relevant or significant is that when it comes to this phenomenon of poltergeist activity or hauntings, for the most part, they may be the same, they may be different. The pattern is this. One is sort of location, location, location. It seems that these types of things happen in unique geomagnetic or electromagnetic environments, in the sense that there's anomalous activity going on. And then there are people within the environment that happen to have some neurochemical problems. The majority, if not all, the people that have recurring poltergeist activity around them, it's linked to them as opposed to a house. It's them. And they tend to be either seizure-prone or epileptic. And it's very common that when they start taking medications to quell the seizures, the phenomena follows in suit, which suggests that the same region of the brain that mediates epilepsy and seizure activity may be responsible for this phenomenon. So that's part of the equation. But then there's one more important part. We discovered that apparently with all those things, location and the energy, you need a person who is hypersensitive to these electromagnetic fields. And some very few people are, but when they are, it's blatant. And then the last part of the equation is what we call inductive resonance coupling, which means that the person in that environment, their nervous system must link up with that environment that's external to their body. And when that happens, voila, things occur. So if all those things are occurring in the right way, things begin to happen. Disembodied voices, banging noises, objects being thrown around, ports, the whole thing. And it's so consistent that it's somewhat boring because, you know, we go out, we interview the people, and the interview is quite extensive. And if the people refuse to answer a lot of our questions about their history, their medical history, and what medications are on, and which includes recreational drugs, if they won't answer that, I usually just walk away. Because it means they're hiding something. And so it's a very invasive procedure, but without asking questions, you don't get any answers. So that's the tip of the iceberg. And what's amazing is that for example, you're in a room and a large object, let's say a sofa or a man weighing 200 pounds, it's picked up by nothing visible to the naked eye and thrown across the room. And this has happened in more than one of our cases. Well, here's the problem, that if this is based on what we know about the energies in the universe, before this could happen, the energies we know of would produce such heat as a byproduct for this, it's the second law of thermodynamics, that the person's clothes would burst into flame, everything else in the room would ignite, and you and everything else would be immolated. That doesn't happen.
Wow.
Which means that we're looking at an endothermic process, which could be the only endothermic process of this nature that exists. And where the energy, like for example, if you're sitting still, it's one thing. When you move, your body uses more energy, produces more heat than when you're sitting still. If that energy was used to pick up a heavy object and throw it, you're using 20 times the energy you'd use to sit still. So imagine a force that's invisible to the naked eye picking up and throwing massive objects around. And we're looking at a force that, if we come to understand it, it change the course of a human existence, because it does work without heat. That doesn't happen in the world we live in.
Right.
So this could tell us a lot about the world we live in. It could also change it in a very productive and positive way.
So do you think, Dr. Taff, that this fascinating kind of alternative force could be managed, or do you think also that there are individuals that can in fact control it psychically through desire or magic or will?
Well, first of all, let me explain something. There are two types of psychokinesis. There's macroscopic, which you call poltergeist activity, where sometimes heavy, massive objects are moved around, and it's random, it's spontaneous. The people aren't making it happen consciously; it just happens. Then you have the microscopic type, which is something that you actually try to make happen, affecting a random event generator, affecting a computer, the old Schmidt boxes from decades ago that were developed. And that is somewhat controllable, but that may not be the same thing seen in poltergeist cases. And again, the more we learn about this, the stranger it gets. I mean, when I first entered the field, I thought, well, this stuff will probably be proven. Exactly what the word implies. It's a noisy spirit. But fortunately, that didn't play out. The evidence doesn't support that conclusion. Yeah. But again, if there is a ubiquitous form of energy that exists that we as human beings can access and put to work, albeit unconsciously, it sort of behooves us to find out what's going on, how it's going on, and why. And I think that if this energy could take us to the stars, literally, this could be the answer. And everything we know that produces heat, produces energy, produces a great deal of heat. Yeah. Geothermal, hydroelectric, nuclear, it's all heat. Imagine generating power without heat.
Do you think, Dr. Taff, that as Lesley, I think, was hinting at, can people deliberately do this?
The only thing that I've ever read about where it's been somewhat controlled, or it's chosen to act on, that's a minute, that's the microscopic type. To my knowledge, there's never been a case where a person was able to basically develop the macroscopic type that make objects fly around. It could be that different parts of the brain are responsible and the mechanisms are somewhat different, which I think may be true. But see, here's the thing. We have tools and technology now that we haven't had before. I think if you had people who were having recurrent episodes of poltergeist activity, you put them and had some functional MRIs on them, some PET scans and SPECT scans, you might discover something that's unique about their brain that isn't the same in the average person. And these people are far few between. It's not like everyone's walking around with the ability to do it. It's sort of like, okay, I've raced cars on tracks, road race cars, and everyone can drive, but few people can race because the hand-eye-foot coordination is not there, the stamina is not there, all of that, the ability to use your body in such a way. Or let's say you're a hockey player or you're a football player. Not everyone could play games, but they couldn't be a professional athlete. it could be this is the same thing, but in another, let me throw you another thing at you that's similar but not identical. Like I said, the research to me that was most significant when the lab was up and running at UCLA was the field work where you investigate the hauntings and poltergeists and things like that. But the more quiet phenomena we investigated, what we call now remote viewing, I called it telepathy, precognition, clairvoyance. We had a side development group at UCLA. We ran it for 11 years, something like that, and it worked really well to the point where you could take most people and you could enhance some inherent ability they had to the point where it was demonstrable. And it became so reliable and consistent that we ourselves were amazed. But it also told us something about the nature of this phenomena that really made us question the reality we live in. What it comes down to is this. There's 3 or 4 different types of mental phenomena people have spoken of for more than a century. You know, actually, it's the dawn of Society for Psychical Research in 1882 in the UK. There's telepathy, which means mind-to-mind communication. There's clairvoyance, the ability to perceive events at a distance without another mind intervening, supposedly. And then you have precognition, the ability to see the future, free of logic and inference and deduction. And it's amazing that when we were writing this group, we assumed it was telepathy, but then we discovered that it's far more than that. Let me give you some examples. There was, the best example of that would be, there was a girl that came to our group, was a woman, another volunteer in the lab, and she didn't know too much of what we were doing. She was around my age, kind of wild and crazy. This is the hippie era. This is the mid 70s. So we didn't know anything about her, and we told her what to do. Think of someone real well, and then we're gonna rattle off verbal impressions. We record. We take the tape. You play it back, and you comment about what's accurate, what's not. Immediate feedback as to what was going on. So we start describing the person, a big home with large glass walls, beautiful foliage around the house, just gorgeous. And then we see a giant kitchen lined with empty jars of Bako bits. What? And then we described some other things, and then we saw this man being very viciously beaten and mugged. So the session ends. The girl takes the control of the audio recorder, and this is all done in a sensory deprived environment. You can't see or hear anything. Mm-hmm. It's like all you have is your own mind. So she plays the recording back, and she said, "Yeah, we came up with a strange phonetic version of his name. It was close to it, but not 100% accurate. The description of the house was very accurate. It was really amazing." Where literally we got to the kitchen lined with empty jars of Bako bits. Yep, that's what there was there.
Wow.
And could have been coincidence. The foliage, the large glass walls, it could have been coincidence. Then we get to the part of it being mugged, and she goes, "He's never been mugged." She was dating this guy with it. She knows him pretty well. "No, he's never been beaten up." What are you talking? "No, okay." So the session ends. A couple days later, I'm in the lab. Up in the lab. And this girl calls in, and she said, "Remember the session the other day?" Yeah. "Remember what you guys said?" "Yeah, pretty much, so to a point." "Well," she said, the night you were doing this, the night we were doing this, he was up in San Francisco, and he was being viciously beaten and mugged at that time."
Whoa.
She said, "But I didn't know that."
Oh, my.
And so, it's remote. It's amazing. And she said, "Well, that would imply that it's information that you can access." So, and this is where it gets really strange. And so that suggests more clairvoyance. Or we were linking to him. He knew what was going on. We didn't know, and she didn't know. Let's go one step further. we got to the point where we were bored and tired with what we were doing. We've been there, done that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to do our first precognitive session, which was kind of unusual because it was the last session of that evening, and we said, try to describe the randomly chosen target of next week. And okay, so we start describing a tall man, dark, medium brown, darker brown hair, blue eyes, very intense, volatile, the whole bit. And we come up with just some names, and eventually we saw him, this man beating her, relentlessly beating her, and we saw him killing her. So the lights come on. She takes the control. Yeah, the description of him was accurate. He had a very odd voice. Turns out the man was, I'm blanking out of the name as we're speaking. Albert Salmi, the actor. And he was in everything.
Really?
He was in several Twilight Zone.
I know who he is.
Volatile as hell. Yeah, he always played a heavy.
Yeah, he's my age.
Yeah,
would be,
Yeah, he was volatile. He beat her a lot. And I said, you might want to think about divorcing him. No, he wouldn't kill me. Some years later, to the day, he kills her and then kills himself.
Yeah,
And so, now the question is, it was, what's the source of the information? She knew a lot of it, but she didn't know all of it. But the one that really knocked it out of the park was this is one of many sessions. I think I mixed up the stories. The last session wasn't precognition. The last session was a normal one, but we had to describe a date given to us a week ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Then we did it again, and we described a tall woman, beautiful blue-eyed blonde, professionally dressed like a model, and we saw a giant house in the Hollywood Hills, 3 stories, a baby grand piano, and a man dressed in black. Black cape, black mask, black pants, black shirt, black gloves, black hat, a black cape, and an imposing sword. And we thought we were going crazy. So the next week, new people are brought in to third parties that had not been there the last session. And everyone is given a sealed envelope with a number in it, a piece of paper. We then roll dice. We tell everyone, open your packet, and whosever number matches the dice roll will be the subject, the target. Okay, this woman goes, oh, it's me. So we told her to take the tape, and if anything is accurate, stop it, give us feedback. So the tape's running. We describe her perfectly. Her face, her hair, her figure, her height, or the clothing she was wearing, the color. And in the room, there were something like 24 chairs, and each chair had a number under it. That wasn't our doing. They did other things in that room as well. And she sat in the one chair we named a week earlier. That could have been coincidence. The house, the 3-story home, baby grand piano, could have been coincidence. We come to the thing with the man playing, the tall man, all in black with the sword, and the girl stops and she looks at me and she goes, "How do you know who I am?" I go, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "How do you know who I am?" I go, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "I'm Tony Williams." And I went, "And? Don't you know who I am?" "No. My father's Guy Williams. He played Zorro for Disney." "What?" "Wait." She goes, "When did you make this tape?" "A week ago." She goes, "I didn't know I was coming here till about 2 hours ago, but you said this a week ago. So what does that imply?" "Well, something about the future is already there." And it really unnerved her. It unnerved some of our regular members of our psych training group. It makes us wonder is how much of the future, how much control do we have?
Mm-hmm.
How could we describe an event that had not happened for a week? And describe the woman, describe her clothes, describe the house, and describe Zorro without using the name Zorro. Astronomical probability if we're guessing.
Well,
so what does it mean?
I do think, Barry, that a lot of communication, spirit communication or communication is carried out in symbology, right? And in the way that you saw that with the costume would be a kind of a very normal way that the Akasha or the Great Information Highway plugs in. But I think, I know Wes has a comment about this too, but I think that as a hypnotherapist, that, and someone who does a lot of past life regression and regression in general, time is not linear. It isn't anything like the way that we need to think of it to progress, I believe. We have to have, certain things to hang on to make it through the physical life, but time is not linear. And I think it may be possible that there are numerous timelines occurring simultaneously. And it may also be possible that some timelines get activated but others don't, that there are many possibilities within possibilities. So but I do think that it's traveling through time, and as we call it in hypnosis, forward pacing. It is something that just simply happens when you plug in, and with some people are better at it than others, or more accurate, or are able to zero in on the timeline that's being activated.
Correct. But see, what it boils down to in terms of parapsychology is the information occurs in the present from another mind. We call that telepathy. Again, if it occurs to the future, it's precognition. For the past, it's retrocognition. And it depends on where the information appears to come from will determine the description and causation of the perception. And here's the thing, is that when it comes to time, space and time, and this phenomena, it's like a giant hologram. In normal photography, if you have a 8 by 10 photograph of somebody, if you cut it in half or quarters or eighths or sixteenths, you get smaller and smaller pieces of the whole. The hologram, if you cut it up, each piece will recreate the whole, but it's of lower resolution. The only model of the parent that deals with this in terms of the paranormal, the only model is basically a holonomic one, which suggests that the past information still exists and the future's information already exists. Not the events, the information related to the events. What we're accessing is information. And it gets, we were so successful on that first voyage in terms of their precognition session, we got bored with the real-time stuff. We tried it again weeks later. And we go, well, how weird will this be? So we're just always doing our thing. We kept seeing fire, 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 fire. We're losing our mind. Why are we all seeing fire? Okay, I'm up in the lab the next day, and I see fire engines coming to the Neuropsychiatric Institute where our lab was located. And I go down, and the conference room, it was a controlled environment that we used. Apparently, there was an outlet socket behind one of the drapes. It shorted, it sparked, and it caught the drapes on fire. So that room was on fire hours after we made we described the event. No wonder why we kept seeing fire. It was imminent. And this is, there was a 1960, the original movie, The Time Machine, where George, the lead character, says, "Can man control his destiny? Can he change the shape of things to come?" And, let me one quick story. 1970, I met a girl. It's my last year of college before I went to graduate school, and named Sharon, beautiful blue-eyed blonde. We started dating. Everything was great. She lived in San Fernando Valley. I lived in West LA. And then the dreams began, and the dreams were always the same. I'm in the back seat of a car. I saw Sharon very clearly in the passenger seat. I couldn't see the driver. I just saw that he had dark hair, which doesn't mean a lot. And I couldn't see the dashboard of the car. The car turns into the cul-de-sac going to Sharon's home in the San Fernando Valley. And a much larger car comes flying at us and hits us. And there's explosion, there's glass, there's fire. It's horrible. And I go, this isn't good. So I kept having a dream, and I said, well, I better tell Sharon about this. So I told her about it, and I said, I think it's good that we stop dating. I don't think it's a good. She says, what kind of crap are you throwing at me? This is sense. I go, look, it's not worth our relationship if we're dead. She goes, you're making this up because you don't want to drive all the way out here. Hey, I had a great car. Gas was 25 cents a gallon. Who cares? I mean, I had a Z28 Camaro. It was like driving a road racing car.
Oh, yeah.
There was very little traffic. I enjoyed going there. It was fun. And I said, I'm not going to risk our lives. It's not worth it. So we stopped dating because she wanted to. And I really didn't blame her because I might have done the same thing if she threw it at me. I think I would have. And so we stopped. So some time later, I don't know, months later, she started dating some other guy. And they're going to her house, into the cul-de-sac where she lived. And wham! Another car hits the car she's in. Her boyfriend, the driver, was killed instantly. She was badly injured. She's had to deal with, a doctor's thing care for a long time. Now, did I prevent my dying, or did my ego put me in the driver's seat? I'll never know. But one of the things I thought of was inviting her to come stay with me in Los Angeles, rather than staying in the San Fernando Valley, which would have prevented it. But she would have went, what? You want me to what? I couldn't ask me. And then her mother said to me, they had a big house. Why don't you come just live with us? I go, live with you? Where am I going to sleep? Oh, in Sharon's room. I go, what? So anyway, it just didn't happen. And this was a long time ago. This is 40 years ago. So did I change the future? One last dream that's notable. On a case I was working on in 1977 in L.A. I talked to the lady on the phone about what's going on, strange noises, things moving around on their own, ports, things like that. So go out there. It was Valentine's Day, and we go out there, my colleague and I, and walked in. And for the first time in my life, I was so overwhelmed by a woman's physical beauty that I couldn't react. I was like, "What?" I couldn't imagine. This girl was so beautiful that it was like a young Liz Taylor and Joan Collins fused into one body. So we started talking and the whole bit. We started dating and everything was great. I mean, it was a perfect relationship. She lived, she moved into her mother's condo in the Hollywood Hills. She was my age, at least she said she was. Everything was great, but then came the dreams. And the dreams were always the same. All I knew was that it was July 22nd and the relationship ended. I didn't know why. And I didn't want to tell her because if I told her, she might misinterpret it as the fact that I wanted out of the relationship, which I did not want. So the weeks go by, our relationship's perfect in every way. I mean, she participated in our site training groups. She went out in some cases with us, and it was perfect. It was kind of like a dream come true for both of us. So the dreams continued. So on July 22nd, we wake up together. I wake up, and she's under the covers, and she won't come out, and she's crying. Why didn't you help me? I said, with what? When the room lit up. I go, when the what? When the room lit up. What do you mean when the room lit up? When the room lit up. I go, what room? She goes, this room, our bedroom. Huh? She said something paralyzed her. She felt herself being lifted off the bed. She felt herself moving laterally or horizontally. She found herself in a round metal room on a pedestal-like table, metal, either brushed stainless or aluminum or whatever, and it was cold. She was strained at her neck, her abdomen, her wrists, and her ankles very tightly. And there was little guys around her. We call it like grays, we call them now. Big heads, big black eyes, no nose, no ears, slit for a mouth. They were cutting. Their skin was very reptilian-like. And so they're cutting her, she's telling me, and they're putting things in her body, and they're hurting her. And so I said to her, she's still under the covers, mind you. I said to her, do you know anything about UFO abduction? She goes, what? What UFO what? She had no interest in UFO. She thought it was a lot of garbage. Because we had discussed it once, and she said, don't bother, I'm not interested. Okay. So I finally coaxed her out from under the covers, and she's got bruises around her neck, around her abdomen, around her ankles, and around her wrists, as if she was held too tightly too long by something, the restraint. She's bleeding from her nose, bleeding from her ear, bleeding from her rectum, bleeding from her uterus, but she wasn't menstruating. And she had little chunks of skin taken out of her back, like by a melon baller.
Oh,
and
gosh.
she had a complete breakdown. And now it was interesting. One of the neighbors who didn't know anything about this, it was a day later, said, "Did you see that thing over here the other night?" And what? There was this thing glowing. It was huge. It was hovering over this area, and our power went out, which it did. The power went out for a couple hours. I said, "No, we were inside." So, can I prove it? Can I prove? Okay, yes, what I described happened. Was it an abduction? I don't know. Now, and then at one point she said, "Why did they take you?" And I said, "I wouldn't take me." And as a joke, I would have. I said to her, "I would drive them crazy. I want to know two things. I want to know what your power source is. I want to know what the propulsion system is, what your avionics, blah blah. Power conversion. How do you propel yourself without using aerodynamics to do so? Blah blah blah." And so it didn't help her. So she sort of came apart at the seams. The psychiatrists in those days just assumed you were psychotic if you made such claims.
yeah.
As did psychologists. And so had that not occurred, whatever it was, we would have been married in less than a year. But it did occur. I can't change the past.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems that whatever UFOs are, I only suggest the majority are not our UFOs. They're from another technology far more advanced than ours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They use forces that we may call paranormal the way we use electromagnetism.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now, what's interesting, in the long history of ufology since World War II, maybe even before that, in the late 30s, early 40s, there has never been an instance of a UFO producing a sonic boom, yet they've been tracked at hypersonic speeds for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But so that means they're not flying aerodynamically. Well, we don't know how to not fly aerodynamically. They're using another method of propulsion. And I have a strange feeling that down deep somewhere, that there's a faction of our government and probably others that know a lot more than we'll ever know.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they're not going to release the data. And to be honest with you, from what I've seen, how people react to things they don't like and they don't understand, it may be better that this information is not disclosed because, some people like myself or you guys might take this in and go, "Wow, that's amazing, it's fascinating." Other people might react in a very negative way. And if we're already in a crazy world where people commit terrible crimes against each other for no reason, and they go to war because they have a different theological, beliefs, and we don't want to add another level of insanity to that. You don't tell a war-weary world, "Hey, look, we weren't made in God's image. Some other race of beings created us for a purpose that we don't yet understand." Well, then, okay, well, if someone else created it, then who was God to them? Who was God to them? And in our culture, we live in a sense without domestic tranquility, Western civilizations cannot exist. And if we disclose such things to the population, "Oh yeah, you've had contact with these different beings, and we've let them abduct people, and they've given us toys to play with, which we can't really control that well," it wouldn't go over real well. It would be one of the most socially disruptive bits of information ever given to the human race. And as we approach the holidays, Christmas and Easter, you start talking about the fact that what we think about religion is about God is wrong. It wouldn't go over real well. So, that's the problem.
Well, it is a problem, but that being said, I think all we have to do is just look at what's going on in popular media to see where the interest is. I mean, a show like Ancient Aliens that is arcane, to say the least, is in its 14th season. and is broadcast all over the world. So I think, you know, I have a little bit more of a hopeful attitude, Barry, because I think really what's going on on our orb is global amnesia. That's what I think is going on. I think we all know, you know, have a much deeper understanding of who we are and where we come from. And you know, even the Pope, you know, is surprisingly has come out and said, you know, if there were any, you know, ETs that showed up, I'd say, you know, welcome, and I'd baptize them, and I'd say we have the same God. So I don't know. I think things are. Wes, what do you think about that?
I think we are in a different, hugely enlightened era. And what Dr. Taff was saying before, which, as you know, Lesley, is one of my interests, remote viewing. It sounds to me like, Dr. Taff, you were accessing the signal line, as they call it. And I don't know if you were following Ingo Swann's formula or David Morehouse's or someone else, but I would agree that we all now have access to all information in space-time. We just need to enable it within ourselves.
I think so.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. What's interesting about this in particular is that the concept called implicate order, which in parts suggests that that we're able to access information remotely from ourselves, but it goes beyond that. There's evidence now that long-term memories do not reside in our brain.
Right.
The theory is they reside in an external power field. That means if we're the way we access our information on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis, from the day we're born to the day we die, if it's a remote process or accessing information in order to function, well, that would mean that the paranormal is not paranormal. This is the way we're designed to function. And it's a question of coming to accept this. And again, it challenges the worldview, our perspective on reality. And people are reluctant to change because they don't understand it. And again, how many degrees of freedom do we have? Is it all a bunch of random chaos? We just stumble through reality, you know? And I just have this, as my book discussed and my website, barrytaff.net discusses. I have a strong feeling that in the distant future, when all this is understood, we come to grips with it. We're not going to like what it tells us, because it's going to tell us of a reality that we're totally unfamiliar with. It's like it'd be like taking a car back 10,000 years ago in time. People would freak out. Well, why is it making all the noise? Why is it moving? It's not an animal. It's really hard. It's very complicated. And the bottom line with all of this, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Would you agree then the non-locality of consciousness, non-local consciousness? Yeah,
I mean, the idea would be that everything is everywhere. That in all space, there's the information of all time in all space. So whether you're in your car, or you're sleeping in your bed, or watching TV at home, or you're on a plane at 40,000 feet, again, information about space-time is equally distributed. The same way, the only theory or model of the brain, which is Dr. Carl Pribram, was the first to discuss neural holography. The only theory of the brain and consciousness that seems to play out in a valid way regarding the paranormal is that information is equally distributed through space-time, just like it is in a hologram. So, again, if you want to see something from 5,000 years ago, you want to see something from 5,000 years in the future, theoretically you could do it. We can prove, in some part, the seeing of the past, because we can objectively verify that. But the future, it's more difficult, because unless we ourselves can't verify it objectively, it doesn't mean it's true. So, you know, there are problems with that. The day that JFK was inaugurated, I told my parents he would die in office on Thanksgiving of '63, and they went, "What?" I said, "Well, it's not. He's going to die of illness." I said, "No, I think it's going to be a lot worse than that." And they went, "Oh, okay, you're crazy." And then a couple of years later, when it happened, they didn't talk to me for weeks.
Yeah,
But nor did a lot of my friends. And so it's people have an odd response to some elements of the paranormal, and like I said there's an article on my website called "A Different Kind of Psychic: Being a Medical Intuitive," and I've been a medical intuitive since I was a kid, and it's interesting. I thought, okay, why not my friends and family? Why don't they have these experiences? And I'm telling you, it's cost me a lot of friends over the years where it's fun and games, and then when it gets real serious, they back away because they're frightened of you, or they think you're crazy. And, it's an example. I met a girl online 6 years ago. Never met her in person. Very, very attractive girl. She looked very much like a young Joan Collins. Another of my stereotypes. So I met, we talked, and I am looking at her pictures online, and she's so beautiful. I said, look, I have to be honest with you. I'm looking at your pictures, and you don't look healthy. You look sickly. She goes, what? How do you know? I said, what do you admitted she was born a blue baby, and she's been sick with one thing or another her entire life. And, but how can you tell from looking at a picture? I don't know. I'm looking at your picture, and I'm feeling you feel sick. So the last time I actually spoke to her was about a year ago, and we covered a lot of things, a lot of information. But one of the things I was emphatic about, I said, look, you've got to go to see her mammograms done. Why? Just do it. You got to go see an oncologist. Just do it. And she didn't. And then earlier this week, she found lumps in her breast, and she had to go to see an oncologist. They found that if they haven't done a biopsy yet, but they probably will. And I said, remember I talked to you about this, like last year? She goes, no. And then 1973, I was dating a girl I met in the lab. Looked like a young, short Shirley MacLaine. We get along real well. And then we were talking once on our couch talking, and we were eating. Actually, we were eating. And she's sitting across from me, and I said, I pointed to her left breast area. You got a tumor there. She goes, what? You got a what? A tumor. How can you see it? I said, well, it's inside you, and you better go check it out. What? Huh? I said, look, don't worry, it's benign. How do you know it's benign? I said, there's no calcium around it. So what are you talking about? Okay. So she finished her degree at UCLA. She got a job very quickly. She had to have a medical checkup for insurance purposes. They found a lump. They found a tumor. They did a biopsy. It was benign. They took it out anyway. She goes, I can't be around you. Why? Because she goes, I feel like a piece of glass around you, and I'd have no privacy. But I helped you. She goes, I don't want that kind of help. And, but the thing that really ended it was we went to see The Exorcist, the opening night.
Oh, my.
That's a good romance film. That's a date night selection.
Well, no, she wanted to see it as much as I did.
Okay.
But she didn't know that much about it.
Oh, okay.
So the film starts, and during the first act, a young Linda Blair is being bounced around on the bed. And I turned to Carol, and I said, this is my girlfriend. I said, I've seen a bed do that at a house in Hollywood. And she, what? And so in the front of the theater, a voice comes out, hey, Barry, is that you?
My gosh.
And Carol didn't sleep. I said, first of all, Carol, it's a movie. It's based not on a novel, not based on a novel. Don't worry about it. But she got trouble sleeping, and so, but you see, it's sort of like I live in a different reality than most people. Definitely. My reality is a paranormal one. Most people, they get like you grow up, you go to school, you get an education, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, and you die. That's reality. Well, not in my world.
No.
I grew up and went to school, never got a normal job, never got married, never had any children. So I had a lot of time to think about things and do work, research, rather than be consumed with normality.
And that was your path. And I believe that we have a kind of a selection process, and we have a lot of responsibility for like the major points that happen in their lives. But one thing a little quick thing I'd say about your medical intuitive gift, from a metaphysical standpoint, I would say that you had spent a lot of lifetimes as a doctor and practitioner, probably back even far in the sands of time. And I think that there are actually a lot of doctors or healers that are medical intuitives, but they don't express it that way. But you definitely have that gift, and I think it comes from just someone who has done that and who has used those tools that way, and that happened in other sophisticated cultures in our deep past.
Yeah, I mean, another incident. Sometimes I see what's wrong with someone. I can look in them, and other times I could just be sitting next to a stranger and I'm feeling sick, and I ask them, and they say, "How did you know?"
Oh, yeah.
I was in a movie theater about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, Century City, near where I lived, and I sit down next to some guy, my friend's to my left, this guy's to my right, stranger to my right, and suddenly my kidneys were killing me. And I said, "Boy, where did my kidneys suddenly hurt?" And the guy to my right says, "That's odd, I've been having a problem with my kidneys all week." Okay, so I moved to another seat.
Yeah, so you're
when
empathic.
The Dark Knight came out. Yeah, when The Dark Knight came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, when The Dark Knight came out, went to see it at the theater with an old friend. We drove separately. So the movie starts. I hadn't seen this girl. I knew her from UCLA a long time ago. And suddenly my bladder starts spasming, burning. I go, "Oh, oh my God." She then got a call from her daughter. She had to leave. So there was nothing I could help her with, so she left. And I stayed. I watched the movie. The minute she left, I was fine. I found out the next day that she was suffering from a really bad bladder infection.
Oh.
But
I'm sorry you had to...
You're sick.
Sorry you had to feel that, Barry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, an old girlfriend showed up. This is 1999, out of the blue. I hadn't seen her in a long time. So it was warm outside. She was wearing a halter top, and I was talking to her. And I said, "What's over your chest?" She goes, "What?" I said, It looks like an octopus or a squid." "What are you talking about?" I said, "Oh, it's not on you. It's in you. You better go see an oncologist." "Well, you've got your breasts are riddled with tumors." Yep, they were. She had to have a bilateral double mastectomy. So I didn't know it was there. Again, this is as normal for me as it is to breathe. One of the last doctors I had in L.A. Before I left, so he's taking my pulse and blood pressure or whatever. He gets near me, and the first thing I said, "You drive a black Lexus SC430. Because how did you know that?" "Well, you're standing right next to it." And then I said, "You've got lumbar problems, right? Some upper respiratory distress. How could you know that?" And he just ran out of the room and told her other doctor to come in and finish the examination.
I hate to be the bad guy here, Dr. Taff. We've got to wrap it. 5 minutes.
Okay.
Well, I had a question, just one little question for you, Dr. Taff. Again, just going back to the nature of poltergeist activity, which is something that fascinates me, particularly since you were really the first one to suggest that it was a non-localized energy field of some sort, and having all of these conditions that needed to be in place for the phenomena to occur. Did you find that adolescents or teens or premenstrual girls, is there a higher incidence of this kind of, I don't know if I could call it psychokinetic, but the aspect of poltergeist activity that is generated by a human physical body, if in fact that's the way it works?
Yeah. It's been known for a long time, from the early onset of this research, that the most common recipients or experiencers of this type of phenomena were pubescent adolescent children going through these changes because hormonal shifts in their body. But see, that was a very crude, generic description. What it also is people who have very bad ability to deal with stress. So there's many ways to produce it's like there's many things that could produce heat. Light will produce heat, sound can produce heat, fire can produce heat, friction can produce heat, chemicals can produce heat. but heat is the end result. But all these different methods produce heat. The same thing here, but it seems the commonality is the I guess susceptibility to electromagnetic field, and also the, like I said, the very likely high probability of people being seizure prone or epileptic. It can be so subtle. If you have focal seizures, certain parts of their bodies.
Yeah.
And if we had more time, I could fill you in when I moved out of LA.
Next
came
time,
out here in no man's land. Yeah, incredible things going on in both houses I've been in. I mean,
my goodness.
Amazing.
Well, we would love to. I mean, if you could come back and see us in June in a couple months, we would adore that, Barry, and we can talk some more about that phenomena. And I'd also like to discuss your feelings about telepathic, human-incited telepathic communication with ETs, a la the kinds of things that Stephen Greer are exploring right now. So we'll get to that next time.
I would. That's one thing I won't discuss. Anything to do with Stephen Greer. I don't want to.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good that I know that now. Okay. You're not alone, by the way. Anyway, Dr. Barry Taff, we just want to thank you. It is so good to hear from you and to know that you're doing well and you're safe and you're hanging in there. And we look forward to our next opportunity to chat and take things right out again.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you so much. We're going to be.
It was my pleasure.
And this
my pleasure.
Great.
Thank you, Barry.
Sessions.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We'll be talking to you soon.
Right.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you for watching Contact TV.
We would like to thank our generous sponsors, Lightwork Hypnosis, Euphoria and the Euphoria Chronicles, Earth Mystery News, Conspiracy Culture Books, MUFON Canada, Free Experiencers, the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, and Variety Store Productions.
For guest booking information, please email Wes Roberts at producer@contacttv.ca. And don't forget to join us on Facebook and Twitter.